Sometimes you are literally in the weeds and you need to get at a higher altitude to be able to see where you're going. You can't be both putting out the daily fires and have the clarity, the energy you need to be looking at the future vision of the company. When I put somebody in a leadership position, I would work with them of like, what do they own end to end? What do I need to be looped in? And then what do I need to approve before they do? I learned very quickly, you put things in writing because things move quickly. You kind of need to become a drunk parrot as a CEO and just repeat, these values and how they show up in the culture. This founder who founded the company isn't always destined to be the CEO as it scales. I want to give them the feedback, like even if it's not what they want to hear.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Breakout CEO podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Holman, and I am here today with Logan McKnight of GoodKnight Consulting. Logan, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. So this is one of our Advisory Insights episodes where we, once a month, we have kind of a few episodes in 1 week that we set aside for people who maybe aren't current scaling CEOs, but you work with scaling CEOs. So you guys get to bring in all of the good information that scaling CEOs use to actually do the scaling that they're trying to do. So it's great to have kind of a community on the show where it's, we love the CEO stories. That's the core of what we do, but to have the advisor side of it, as I call it, at least have the advisor side of it really rounds it out. So, but you bring both, kind of CEO experience and advisor experience. So we're getting the full package here today.
Yeah. And that was, definitely my CEO experience kind of founded why I wanted to work with scaling CEOs because of all of the challenges I knew I came up with in working with them alone.
Yeah. Give us a little bit of flavor for what it was you did. You were in the healthcare space, the neuroscience or surgery. Like that sounds complicated. Simplify it for us. I'll mess it up if I say it.
No, I'll make it as simple as possible. So I did neurophysiology for most of my career. And so I ran a service company. We had neurologists, a medical billing part, and we even had a company in India. But basically, we had technicians that went into the operating room and they would set the patient up with electrodes and let the surgeon know when they screwed up. So no pressure, no stress, right? So we were in pretty high stakes neurosurgeries, vascular surgeries, and things like that with techs all over the United States and India.
Okay. Wow. How big would you say your company was? Do you describe it in terms of revenue? Do you describe it in terms of people, number of surgeries? Like how did you guys describe that?
All the ways. When I started, we had about 12 people. I think because I was I was with the company for 8 years. I started out as the VP of Ops. So I was more looking at people and scaling. And when I started, we were in 3 states with 12 people. And then when I left, we had 11 states with 25 people. And then we scaled from 2 million to 8 million.
Awesome. That's a good run. So,
yeah, especially during COVID.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You mentioned that it was during COVID. How did that impact the scaling? Like surgeries were still happening, but the procedures got way more complex, I would assume, right? And did that make this service more necessary or did it make it harder to deliver? What did COVID do for the service you guys were providing?
Well, there's a number of challenges. One was the restrictions. I'm based in Seattle, Washington, and the West Coast definitely had a lot more restrictions and elective surgery shutdowns, I think, than other areas in the country, which most of our business is in elective surgeries. So we had to go through challenging rounds of pay cuts, furloughs, layoffs. The other part of it was our technologists travel. They get on planes, they, travel to different hospitals in different states. So that was really challenging to try to cross cover logistically, especially when people were not traveling and trying not to travel.
Oh, wow. So you had to navigate that. So you've got your own breakout moments, probably your own pivotal decisions you had to make during that. Happy to go into those if they come into play, in the things that you share and use as tools and resources for the people you work with today. But what would you say, what are some of the takeaways that you take from that CEO experience you have that carry over into how you now help CEOs with their own businesses?
Yeah, so one of the biggest reoccurring themes is allowing your team to have ownership in the areas that they totally run and develop. My struggle as a CEO, especially because I was with the company for so long, was giving pieces of it up and trusting the process to other people. And so honestly, I didn't learn some of these really good lessons that I needed probably until the tail end of being a CEO, and maybe even afterwards when I was actually able to pause and reflect. When you're in the thick of it, especially during COVID, I became the CEO maybe 6 months before COVID. So I really kind of was trial by fire every, couple months getting new information and changes with the company. And what I was doing was trying to stay in the day to day and then also look at the future and the vision and try to figure out where we needed to go. And I realized really quickly, you can't do that. You can't be both putting out the daily fires and have the clarity, the energy you need to be looking at the future vision of the company.
Yeah. But there's kind of I don't want to say contradiction, but there's kind of a conundrum, right? There's kind of this paradox with ownership because people who tend to have a lot of ownership mentality sometimes tend to over-own things, right? Like you said. And I don't know if that's a function of growing up in the business. I like to call it growing up in the business, right? You move from one position to the next, and all of a sudden you're the CEO, you're running it. You know all the positions really well. You know where the things are happening, right? And you know where sometimes people cut corners if that happens. But so
Yeah.
how do you balance that when you say, okay, we've got this ownership mentality, but at the same time, ownership mentality means that people at the top um, need to move into a different ownership mentality than the directly accountable ownership mentality of somebody who's actually fulfilling the kind of the functional role. Those are different, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think I really struggled with that. I started as a VP and even transitioning into my CEO seat, like it was really hard for me to let go. And I'm fortunate enough that I created a culture of people being able to tell me what was on their mind. And so the leaders that I had appointed, but wasn't truly giving them ownership, they let me know. They let me know that they were frustrated with how much they had to run through me, and the lack of clarity around what they were allowed to own from end to end versus what I needed to be looped in it with and versus what I needed to approve. And so we developed a system of those were the three categories. When I put somebody in a leadership position, I would work with them of like, what do they own end to end? What do I need to be looped in? And then what do I need to approve before they do? And that list is something that shifts as trust develops and they get more competent in their role. But I realized laying those, like very literally writing the three things down and going through it with them helped establish ownership and then the confidence for me to be able to step back.
Yeah. Every company should probably have those three things written down. So if our audience didn't write them down, they should write them down right now, right? So it was own end to end, and then looped in
Yeah.
and approve.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
say owned, informed, and then approved.
Okay. Owned, informed, and approved. Even simpler. I should probably be taking notes myself on this right now.
I mean, it's I even have struggle. I have a team that helps me on my consulting side, and I still struggle with it. I mean, it's hard, especially when it's something that you grew up in or it's your brand in your business to, delegate, but it just makes things so much clearer and easier for the team and so much less frustration and disappointment on your end.
Oh, for sure. I'm going to ask a really basic question though. So, and I'm going to throw it, I'm going to give the credit to the audience because I'm sure somebody in our audience will want to know the answer to this question. But really, it's me asking the dumb questions too, right? So, uh, like it's easy to say owned, informed, and approved. Where do you write this down? Because I think we can have all these things and we say, well, here's how it's going to work, and then our team shifts, and then we have to say again, well, here's how it's going to work, and then the environment shifts, we get different customers, and we say, here's how it's going to work. And if we just keep saying, here's how it's going to work, and we don't have like a place for all this stuff to land and live, then we're really not quite, we're really, we're really failing in a way to truly adopt that system. Do you get down into the weeds? I mean, that feels like weeds to me, right? Like if you have to tell people, well, you got to write this down, you got to write it down. Here's where you might write it down. Is that, I mean, maybe it's just the mechanics of it, but I would guess that sometimes you're like, listen, we've gone over this. Did you write it down yet? Did you put it somewhere? What do you recommend people do for that?
I mean, always write it down. I think the great thing too with the age we're in of like AI note takers. I mean, I think every meeting we go in has three AI note takers for every one person now. Is so, you can have a living document. I always suggest that, I think whether you're a Microsoft-based company or you're using Google Workspace or something else, is just have a document that both of you guys are in and connecting with. I mean, as far as when you're doing your one-on-ones with them, they should be the conversation of, okay, do we need to shift anything over? Is there anything that you feel like you need to own end to end? And I always ask my leaders, I mean, that's what a huge question is, like, I want them to push back on me. If they feel
Yeah.
like I'm being looped in or I'm approving a process that they should really own end to end, I want them to fight for that. I want them to tell me why. But
Yeah.
I want it to be really clear. So if they do something and I come back and I say, hey, I really wish you would have looped me in, it's a conversation because we created the standard before. And if we don't write anything down, then chances are there'll be that, well, I thought you meant that I should do this. And that was what was coming up a lot. It was like, oh, well, I thought you said this. And that started actually really aggravating me as a CEO. It's because a lot of times people will be like, well, you told me that. And I'm like, and I learned very quickly, you put things in writing because things move quickly. You're in a lot of meetings. And especially if you have a crucial conversation with somebody and need like to shift the way they're doing their job, put it in writing.
Yeah, I mean, you've spoken like a true attorney here, from from my perspective. Like that's been an irony I've seen in the legal field. I've been an attorney for 20 years and working in the legal field for 25 now, and it's like we are extremely good at putting notes in the file based on client stuff as a CYA, right? Which, funny note, by the way, I was talking with some of my team, and they're like, CYA, that's an actual term? I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, that's exactly what it means. It's an actual term. Um, but we're really good at documenting things to the file when it covers our own potential liability or
Mhm.
decision making. But when you get into the just call it the governance of a law firm, large or small, there's a lot of unwritten, what would you, cultural things, right? Maybe is what you might call them. And so we don't take the time, even in our profession, to document things the way that we do and we're used to doing in a client setting. So that's kind of an inconsistency that I've thought about as I've talked with my team and said, hey, we've got a document. We use monday.com for a lot of what we do. It ends up being a good repository, and we just build another board, and sometimes we've got to clean them up. But having that out there and putting all this in place for our team has been hugely beneficial.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's one of the things about it's hard. It's hard to force yourself to take the notes and put them somewhere. And then sometimes things move so quickly that, something you put in, put in writing last week already needs to be shifted and changed.
Yeah.
One of the exercises I go through with CEOs when we start is, and it's really honestly kind of painful for them to sit down and do this with me, is looking at their vision, the mission of the company, and talking about the values, and not just like the three words that they have, behind the front desk, the actual, like actually how they show up. And that's where you start to talk about like, where do you want your culture to show up? What kind of attributes do you want your team and people to have? And how does it show up with your clients and with each other as the team? And when you start having that conversation as the CEO, because you need to be the source of truth, like people can, if you're letting your COO or other leaders kind of, stay with the culture is, it's going to be like the worst game of telephone ever. And so you kind of need to become a drunk parrot as a CEO and just repeat, these values and how they show up in the culture and instill in people like these core things. And then, of course, their own spin and their own way of doing it, but they can understand like where the standard is as far as how you treat people and your clients.
And I just want to repeat one thing, just so it's clear on our transcript. Hopefully, you said drunk parrot, not drunk parent, right?
Drunk parrot. Yes, parrot, squawk.
Yes. Well. So, what does an engagement look like for you when you walk into somebody? We've got this ownership conversation. We've got the mission, vision, culture, or values conversation. What does that engagement look like? Where does the value start to show up when you're working with clients?
Yeah, and I kind of have shifted this as I've been working with more and more clients, realizing how important it is to do that like foundational work, as painful as it is when you first start, especially if there's, multiple layers of leadership. Like if you have a full C-suite, if you have founders, co-founders, or partners, they need to sit in the room and they need to agree. And a lot of
Yeah,
times that's the catch-all of like when problems happen later in our engagement, there's normally they don't agree fully on
yeah.
like the values or the vision. And then also, how do you pick your priorities? So it's really important to do that work. So I always start out with that when I'm doing, a scaling engagement as far as like where do we need to focus on hiring the right people? And honestly, where in the team are things not aligning that maybe we need to make some changes? And that's a tough one too. It's always not just who do we need to add, but maybe who do we need to remove, right?
Uh, Are
Um,
we're talking right people, right seats, it sounds
right
like.
people, right? And sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can move people from one seat to another on the bus. That was, that was kind of something I would tell my team if they felt like they were in the wrong seat, that we could talk about it and it didn't automatically mean that they were going to be removed from the company, but maybe we could find that better position for them because we were scaling so quickly. And it worked out really well, but unfortunately, just sometimes people are not going to buy into the shift and the change that needs to happen when you're scaling.
Well, and I think if you find that, downstream in the organization, it's kind of easier to say, well, we'll just make that change. We'll hire somebody else. Do you run into that sometimes where, and no names, but do you run into that sometimes where you have maybe people in the wrong seats at the founder level or at the executive level, and you kind of get to the point where you're like, I don't know that the team can find alignment with the, with the makeup that we've got here.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. I even struggled with it when I was the CEO with my own team. I thought, okay, what happens behind conference room doors, nobody knows about it within our company. You better believe everybody feels it. They feel the disconnect. And sometimes I think the struggle is this founder who founded the company isn't always destined to be the CEO as it scales. They can be the CTO, they could be, an advisor, but sometimes they just don't have the clarity to be able to kind of lead the company, and you need to bring in an outside CEO even to help. And that is like a little bit of an ego conversation, and it's hard. But sometimes when I work with private equity, that's what they bring me in for is they're struggling with the founder. And so sometimes it's can we do this with them? Can we figure out a way to do it? Or do we just need to get the right COO underneath them to create a little bit of space between the day to day and where they're taking the company?
Yeah, private equity is they're notorious for coming in and replacing the CEO, replacing the founder,
Hmm.
putting the founder into an honorary
If you're not winning
board
Super
role.
Bowls, they're going to look at the coach, right?
Exactly, exactly. Hey, I read somewhere else some of the stuff you do. I think you have an altitude. Was it altitude or attitude? I think it was altitude, right?
It is altitude, which so I'm based in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm a pretty avid hiker and backpacker. And so one of the things I feel like I got a lot of clarity when I was dealing with COVID and being a CEO, and like the tremendous amount of pressure I felt like I was under, and not being able to really talk to anybody about it, especially within my organization. I would hike, and I found that, like there was a lot of clarity at the top of the mountain that you get
Yeah,
that you don't have when you're at the bottom. And that's where I kind of attributed like sometimes you are literally in the weeds, you are in the forest, and you need to get at a higher altitude to be able to see where you're going and have the clarity to also see the rest of the company, from that view. And so trying to get the founders, the CEOs, out of the weeds, out of the forest, and actually to the right altitude so they can lead was kind of my concepts of working with them. And I do that both through consulting with their companies and then also one-to-one advisory with them.
okay, yeah. No, that makes sense. You actually touched on several different things there. Um, you mentioned how CEOs can't necessarily turn to their team when they're you're seeking lots of different things, right? Wisdom or comfort or a sounding board. You just can't do that. I think that's a core theme that we kind of come back to on the show quite a bit. CEOs just are in a unique position. That's why we need to have communities. We need to have places we can turn to learn and connect with other CEOs, because you can't just do that with your board members or your investors or your employees, or maybe even your spouse or your close friends who are like, I don't know what you're talking about. That doesn't make sense. So
No,
uh,
it's very isolating. It's lonely at the top, right?
yeah, very, very much so. But the top is a great place, as you mentioned, because you get the great views. On a total non-business related thing, do you have a favorite hike that you've done, or a trek you've been on, or
I
what
mean,
stands out?
I'm Mount Rainier, if for anybody who's visiting Washington or Seattle, is one of the most beautiful places I've ever. I mean, it's like where you turn is absolutely gorgeous. And I'm very partial to Seattle in the summer. I think most people are. So I would say if you come out and you can get a hike in the summer, it's well worth it.
And if I'm not mistaken, there are some non-technical routes up Mount Rainier. Is that right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You can, I mean, there's paved, you can drive up the mountain. So you
Oh,
can
okay.
cheat this whole system and you could just drive up there and get the great views.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Well, I've done some backpacking hiking myself, and I just love remembering all the times that I've been out at the top of the mountain. So, but coming back to your altitude, so you, so how do you move somebody who's in the weeds up to that higher ground? Like, what are the two or three things that you end up talking to them about, or that you do to persuade them that this is going to be worth the effort. The views will all be worth it when you get there.
Yeah. So, I mean, first working with them and getting a real good sense of what they want to do, like what their mission is with the company, their vision, and where they want to be. And honestly, I try to stick to like 3 years. I try to make like, even if they have a 10-year goal, I'm like, what can we get done in 3 years, to try to be like, let's speed up the timeline. Because a lot of times what you want to do in 10 years doesn't get done because you think, oh, I got all the time in the world. So I try to kind of condense the timeline with them. And then once we realize that, we kind of stress test, the things the company's been providing and doing. Does it fit into that vision? And then do their people fit in to both the vision and the values that they believe are important for the company to be successful? And they want to, a lot of times they're worried that as they scale, it's not going to feel like the same company. And the
Hmm.
reality is it won't, but you can still keep the core parts that are really, really important and actually to like make it better and improve upon it and have something really unique if you just are able to sit down and identify what those things are. So I think that's the key thing. And once they do that, sometimes it is two steps forward and one step back. Sometimes we'll be working together and they'll kind of, I won't say regress, but go back to old habits and shiny object syndrome of, oh, this looks cool, let's go do this. And it's like, oh, okay. Sometimes my job is like keeping the ships in the channel,
Yeah.
just making sure that we're going the direction that we talked about. And a lot of times we'll stress test it against, is this a real viable new direction, and does it align with your vision, or is this a distraction? And is this person that you're spending all this time with trying to course correct, are they worth that, or are they just not going to be part of the future vision? And that's the reality of it. And you have to be taking care of, obviously you're the captain of the ship, and so you have to take care of the entire ship and the entire crew's well-being. So you can't sacrifice everything for one or two people or one venture. You really do have to think in big picture.
Well, you gave away that you actually do work with CEOs with the bluntness there. You're like, yeah, sometimes it is going to change, and then you got to get on board with it. That's like I'm not gonna sugarcoat this and tell you it's not going to change. It's going to change. Would you rather be deliberate about it, or would you rather have it changing around you without controlling it? Like those are your two
Absolutely.
options.
Yeah, I
So
mean, if anyone is, if we work together, I am blunt because I do appreciate that. On my end, I moved to Seattle about 10 years ago, and it is the most passive aggressive place that I've actually ever lived. I remember I'm from the Midwest, and I remember someone told me, you're so straightforward, almost like that was a negative thing, and I was like, oh, thank you, what a compliment. So But yeah, I want to give them the feedback, like even if it's not what they want to hear, it's what they need to hear in the moment, because that's what I would have wanted. I would have wanted somebody not to just say something to make me feel better. So I didn't realize that when I became a CEO, I had a lot of people just telling me things that I wanted to hear, that they thought I wanted to hear, and not really giving me their honest feedback. And so I want to be that honest feedback for them.
Yeah, no, you're never funnier than when you're the CEO, huh? So,
right. Never more popular.
Exactly. No, that I love that. And I love that you're just coming to bring this all back around together, that you're able to look back on what you did as a CEO, see the things that maybe went well and the things that could have gone differently, and be able to bring that back in as you work with other CEOs. What would a CEO look for in their business or their day-to-day to try to identify, hey, is now the time to bring in somebody like GoodKnight Consulting to come in and help me with this?
Yeah, I think one of the first indicators is their calendar. If they are not able to make any time for big picture strategy meeting, if they don't have blank spots in their calendar, if their calendar is completely full going into every week, I think I looked at that as like, oh, this is a sign of success. Look at all my meetings, look at all my client calls. The reality is if every week looks like that, you do not have the time to, think of the big picture and really do the strategic work you need to do. And the other thing is if you are in control of processes, or you have other people in the business control of processes that only they own, only they are privy to, I think in tech terms, they call it the bus factor, meaning if someone gets hit by a bus, how many people need to get hit by a bus for this to break? And so if you have a bus factor of 1, that's a dangerous sign. And especially if you are that, like I have a lot of CEOs I work with that are like, well, I never want to step away from the business. So I always want to be doing the invoicing. I always want to be doing the day-to-day operations. And the reality is the company can't scale if you're doing that. And they can't grow. They can't spend time on themselves. And God forbid if something does happen to them, or they want to step away or take time off. Like that's the reality they need to think of too, is we're all human.
Yeah.
Shit happens. Sorry, excuse my language, but I mean, that's the reality of it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, I appreciate all this. Actually, sorry to have to cut this short. I feel like there's so much more we could talk about, but maybe we'll do that in a round 2 or something. But it's been really good. How would somebody get a hold of you if they wanted to get in touch, learn more about your perspective and altitude types of philosophies, or work through mission and vision and core values, or any of that stuff? What's the best way to connect?
Yeah, so my website is goodknightconsulting.net. My email, logan@goodknightconsulting.net. And then I'm on LinkedIn just at Logan McKnight. I'm pretty active on there and trying to connect with, businesses and put out content that helps them. So you can reach me any of those places.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking a little bit of time today and coming on to the Breakout CEO. It's been great having you, Logan.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you.
And to the rest of our listeners out there that followed along this episode, thanks again for joining us on the Breakout CEO. Be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you enjoy the show, a rating or a review goes a long way. Our mission is to promote the stories of breakout CEOs in scaling SaaS, e-commerce, and tech companies, to equip peer CEOs with valuable perspectives and confidence. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of The Breakout CEO. I'm Jeff Holman, and I'll see you next time.